Okay, how's everybody doing? My name's Matt Murphy. There's a lot of familiar faces out here. I know some of you. I don't know most of you, but I've seen you all before. And of course, that's because every time David would take a picture, it would end up on his Facebook. And those would pop up right away. And we'd see, jamming pictures. We'd see Coffee Connection pictures. We'd see family pictures from people that I've never met. So everybody's familiar, and it's great to see everybody here. In fact, as I look around, I can see David wandering around taking pictures of the tables and taking pictures of everybody here. And, it's unfortunate we have to meet here this way, but the boys are going to play for about 15 more minutes or so, and then we're going to open this up to anybody maybe who has a small story that they want to tell or just some words they want to tell about David. So welcome. Thank you guys all for coming. Obviously, there's food and refreshments over there. Help yourself to whatever you need. And hopefully, the majority of us have something that they could say, whether it's just real quick, 30 seconds or even a couple minutes. So welcome. If I'm walking around, grab me, introduce yourself to me. I'd like to meet you guys actually face to face and not just through a picture. So welcome. Thank you very much, guys. So one thing that I did, I forgot to mention two things. After I left and I walk around, everyone say, "Oh yeah, good job, good job." And I got to the back and someone goes, "Who are you?" I said, "Well, I'm Matt. Who are you?" He said, No. How are you related to David? So I don't know if I mentioned that or not. So Patricia's daughter, Jody, obviously had a daughter, Jeremy, and that's my wife. So I'm a step-grandson, I guess you would say. Of course, with David, you never felt like that. It was right away, welcome to the family. And he treated me like, from day one, just like I was a grandson. So we are going to open the mic up right now. One thing that I do want to let you guys know that at 3:30, we're going to have a presentation up here in David's honor from the United States Army, right? Or Navy, United States Navy. They're going to be here at 3:30, so that's definitely something we want to be here for. We are going to open up the mic right now. Anybody who has anything to say. The one thing that I'll say, and I've said it a bunch, is the one thing that he left with me and my family are pictures of not only my son, but Ethan and Jackson also, who are my stepson and my stepdaughter, and we have pictures of them from their entire life. And we're still figuring out how we're going to fill that void, because at every party we had pictures, every get-together we had pictures. David and Patricia would take the kids and take pictures the whole time, and we just have hundreds of pictures of our family. So that's a void that we're never going to be able to completely fill, but we're going to have to try and figure out how. And that's one thing that I'm always going to remember David by, is every time those pictures pop up, having those pictures, it's going to be pretty cool. So if anybody else wants to come on up to start us off, the mic's open. Alex, thank you.
So my best memory of David would be my best friends Austin and Brandon and I told him, "We'll get rid of your couch. Yeah, let's take we'll take it down to Help of Ojai. Put it in the back of the truck, and it flew out halfway down, and we just kept going. And about 2 weeks later, we had a party at his parents' house, at Brandon's parents' house, and he presented us with certificates for speedy furniture removal. And we all still have the certificates, and he's an amazing person, and he had a great sense of humor, and the fact that we we messed up, but he he was willing to accept that. Yeah, it fell out halfway down, and we kind of we kind of left it there. We had stuff to do, but David was an amazing person. So that's my best memory of David.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Lenny Clafe. I am Vice President of the Board at the Art Center, where we all are this afternoon. David was a longtime member of the board. His contributions, he was chair of the photo branch and organized all those activities. But more than that, he was our photographer. He photographed the Jammin' concerts that we have here in the summer. He was the publicity photographer for the theater branch, and he brought our computer system into the 21st century. He was really amazing. But that's not how I'll remember David. I'll remember David by his smile. If you look at the photographs in the back, those are not photos that he took, but they're photos of him and his family and his friends, and in each of them, you can see the twinkle in his eye and the smile in his face. I remember, as many of you know, most of you probably don't, I'm a criminal defense lawyer. When David told me he had been a deputy sheriff in Los Angeles for many years, my first reaction internally was, okay. But then I realized he's just such a fine person. A really nice, caring, decent human being. He was probably a great cop, the kind of police we need. We'll miss him here at the Art Center. We'll miss him here in Ojai. I'll miss him, and all of us will too. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Peter Bellwood. My friend David Wollstonecroft, who is a stellar television producer, he produced Versailles. His father is an astrophysicist. And his father in turn had a friend who was also an astrophysicist who died. And somebody got up in support of this person and said, David is not dead. He is simply being rearranged. Here's to you, David.
That was well said, Peter. I like that. I had a very nice and albeit brief, not brief, but I only knew Dave about 2.5 years. Met him at the Coffee Connection, which is a frequent place of ours. And from the first conversation we ever had, we just clicked. And then we started spending a lot of time just hanging out, initially over coffee. Then I got invited over to Dave's home for holidays like Christmas, Easter, Thanksgiving. I think I spent one of at least all of those with him in the 2 years that I knew him. And there was a little bit, kind of some would think maybe a father-son dynamic between the two of us due to our age differences, but really it was just, we were really good friends right away. And I will just tell this one quick story about Dave's calming demeanor, which is kind of different from my father's demeanor, which was a lot more, although they were kind of the similar generations, Dave and my father. My father a little bit older, but Dave was just very serene as opposed to the intensity that my father carried. But, similarities in the sense that I would from time to time drive Dave's truck around and we would do things together. And one time, he left me with his truck while I had a chauffeur driving job, so I had very strange hours. And it was so funny because Dave was having an art show exhibited up at one of his friends' home up in the foothills of Ojai, which I helped him set up. And then I took his truck back to my place, and I said, I'll be back up here in a little bit. I'm going to go take a nap because I had been driving till about 3 in the morning that morning. And we're setting up around 8. So, I was going on about 4.5 hours of sleep. So I went home, went to sleep. Dave's truck is in my driveway. I guess I was asleep for about an hour and a half, and I get a call from Dave. And I roll over, groggy, and I'm, hello. He's like, hey, Clay, how you doing? I said, well, I'm asleep and I'm good. How are you doing? He says, I think I broke my hip. I said, hold on, say that again? Because he's talking literally in the tone that we're having this, there's nothing hysterical in any fashion at all. And I said, hold on, you said you broke your hip, huh? He's like, yeah, I'm just laying on the ground. I'm talking to you. I think there's an ambulance coming. Well, I said, what do you mean the ground? He's like, yeah, I'm just laying on the concrete here, and I'm in bed. And I said, hold on a second, Dave. Let me, because you just caught me in a dead sleep. I said, you're lying on the ground, and you think you broke your hip, and you're not screaming or anything. And he's like, no, I'm just gonna wait it out. But maybe if you want to meet me over at the hospital in a little bit. I said, yeah, I'm on my way. Let me just splash some cold water on my face. I'll get my act together, and I'll meet you over there. And sure enough, I went to the hospital, and he was fine and in great spirits, of course, as he always was. And watching Dodgers games and was a big part of our report too. We watched Game 7 of the World Series last year, and so in any case, there's too many stories just to tell. But the main thing I wanted to express in that story is no matter what was going on in his circumstances, it was not brought out to become anyone else's problem, and that was not that it would have been a problem, of course, but that type of demeanor when someone can respond and just reach out to you with that type of calmness, thinking that while there's an obvious crisis going on, is pretty strong testimony to who he was. So. Just wanted to tell that story there, and it's a pleasure to be with everyone here today. Okay.
I'm Dave's daughter, and I'm going to try not to cry, but that can't guarantee it. I'm here with my brother and my nephew, who's also named Dave Baker, and know that my dad was so proud of both of them and all of his family. The number one thing in his life was family, and he had a big family and a wonderful family. And we were very lucky that he married Patricia and gained such an amazing extended family, real family. I know he considered them his blood family. So I know that he loved each and every one of them with all of his heart. And he also loved his friends. And as I can see, I know some of you. Before my son was born, my favorite thing to do was to come up to Ojai and spend weekends with my dad. Having coffee. We were over at the Java and Joe's at that time. And then we moved over to whatever the other place is, Stir Crazy, something else now. And he ended up over at the Coffee Connection with Brian and his group of friends there. Just hanging out with him was all we wanted to do. And I know he's here watching over and seeing everybody that he touched, and that I know that you touched his life as well. In dramatic fashion, my dad always liked to be the center of attention on holidays. And last Mother's Day, he had his surgery for his hip that he broke. So we all spent that time in the hospital with him at, I believe, his 50th birthday party. That was the 50th? He had a heart attack, and so that was fun. and we were there to see him through. He actually was clinically dead in the hospital, but he's a fighter, so he came back because it wasn't his time. And he'd been through many, many other serious illnesses, and every time I cried and worried and thought it was it. And I'm so grateful that he, kind of went out in a very peaceful way. And I've talked to a lot of people who apparently had the same conversation he had with me and his kids, that he was content in his life and with what he'd accomplished, and most proud of his family and all of his grandchildren, extremely proud of his grandchildren, and spending time with them, and that he had no regrets, and if it was his time to go, he was okay with it. So we're going to miss the jokes and the stories because he was quite a storyteller. John, my brother, and I, and my dad, we had our own secret language that we would make up words and symbols for, which was fun. And if you know my dad, you know he was a techie beyond belief. And so one of the things that will be kind of fun is that I'll have the newest iPhone before he does, for once in my life. So, Dad, you can, maybe you'll have one up there somewhere, but we'll carry that tradition on for you. Between us all, we're all techies. And so thank you all for coming, and thank you to Jeremy and Jody and all of Patricia's family for setting this beautiful memorial up for him. I know it's exactly what he would have wanted. And I know that we'll all be okay, and we'll just miss him dearly.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Carol Yates. Actually, Patricia and I go way back, don't we, Patricia? And I love her and her family. And then the time came when she met the most stellar man. When God made David, the mold was broken. He was loving, caring, creative, intelligent, family-oriented, as has been said. Well, he proposed to Patricia. And if any of you were invited to the initial wedding with a 50s theme, a white sport coat, a pink carnation, and blue suede shoes. Well, unfortunately, he became ill, and everything that was paid for had to be canceled, if I remember correctly. Patricia's shaking her head yes. Oh, dear. Well, David almost died again. This guy was like the cat with 9 lives, for goodness sake. Well, he survived, praise God. And I was so honored to have the privilege of performing their wedding. It was David, Patricia, and his sister. And we had a very intimate, wonderful afternoon. And he was so gracious and kind to me in so many ways. And I know that you have forged a relationship with him that is incomparable, and so have I, and we will miss him, and may he rest in peace. God bless.
I'm David's first cousin, Sherry Lemke, and I want to tell you a story. Since everybody has elevated David up here, never did any wrong. One season, my other cousin, David's brother Art, and David decided, you know what? It's really nice down here in Redondo Beach. We don't need to go to school next semester, right? So, unfortunately, the brains were all in the Baker family. I don't know what happened to our side, but at any rate. So, David and Art, law enforcement lawyer, okay, later. They seemed to straighten it out at some point. They decided to write their own letter to the school because they were 2 years apart. And what they did was they took it to school and said, our family, here's a note from our parents, they're going to be moving. Oh, no, we're going to be away for this semester. We're going someplace. Okay, school thought that was fine. Guess what they did? They surfed the entire semester. They never went to school. And the point of the story is, brains, it didn't even matter. They went back the next semester, no even missed them. But anyway, I'm going to sure miss him. He was a great friend. We've been very close. I remember corresponding with him when he was in Vietnam. And I'll tell you, nobody has a sense of humor like David. He said we were a matched set of terrible bookends, and perhaps there's some truth to that.
Hi, my name's Ed Kassar. I'm here with my wife, Nita, somewheres. When you're not the first speakers, a lot of the stories are already gone. The surfing, to get the Truett officers off their back, they wrote that letter. The wedding, the 50s wedding, I don't know how many vintage stores I was dragged to, and that fell apart. But I did show up with an Elvis Presley wig at one of the parties. Anyway, I knew Dave probably in the late 70s. He was a software consultant and was hired in. I worked at Litton at the time. And I read the obituary and listed all of his technical stuff he'd been involved with. And Dave had very little schooling in software. I think he took a month course or something like that, but he could talk. And so I hired him. He's a brilliant guy as far as he told me. And it turned out that he had a gift, and he was at the right place at the right time. He understood software. It was in his blood, and did so many of the things that I've talked about here. He millionaire twice, once with the software in Camarillo, and another one with the Beverly Hills website. And how we became close is at one time we called it the period between wives, and we bought a boat and we sailed out of Oxnard, and so we spent a lot of time almost every weekend, because things were difficult, out on the ocean, and that's when we became pretty close, and that continued over the long term. It was at my house for his birthday party. We had a magician. It was hot. It was in the San Fernando Valley. And the magician, wearing a tuxedo, asked for a glass of water and cool off a little bit. So we adjourned, and one of the kids, Dave's kids, comes and told me he wasn't feeling well. So I went in, and sure enough, he's in the bed and arguing that he's not having a heart attack. So we called 911. The magician goes to the base of the stairs to make sure that the EMS comes to the house. And by the way, years afterward, he kept asking about Dave. He just somehow felt guilty about it. These big burly guys come up. They look up and said, yeah, a heart attack. We'll have to take him out of here, the stretcher. And they said, well, is there any other way out of your house? Because we had a narrow stairway with, 30 steps. And I said, no, the way you came up is the way you go down. So they looked again at Dave, which was somewhere between 250 and 300, and decided he was well enough to walk. So he walked all the way down. And then the episode Steph was talking about, we were waiting in the waiting room in the emergency, and they called code, and I don't know the color, but she understood what it was. And so we went and talked to the nurse, and they said, yes, He was up at X-ray and had another heart attack, and he was out. Dave later said that he walked through the tunnel and saw the white light. But anyway, so we walked in a room separating the waiting room from the wards, and a nurse came out and said, "He's okay." So she turned around and just hugged me, and I hugged her. And I looked this way, and the big sliding glass doors were there, and Dave's family was there. And my only thought is that they thought that was it. Never felt as terrible in my life. So we started waving, okay, okay. So a lot of adventures over all those years. And one last thing I wanted to say is that Dave didn't live his life, he let it. He knew what he wanted and was willing to go and try for it. He's a techie. He had a period where he was an amateur radio operator and worked in Civil Air Patrol. He went and DX, which is making communication in the amateur radio world, in every county in Texas. That's quite a feat. So he set his mind to do something. He did it, and well, of course, I'm going to miss him. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Brian Berman, and I had the good fortune of being David's best friend. The last 6 years, I can't tell you how many times we were in multiple coffee shops, first thing in the morning, and I don't even like coffee. But David was the reason why I went. And I call David the gadgetarian. David loved technology, and he loved the learning of new technology. So any new device that came out, I would send him links to it if I spotted it first. Next thing you know, we're sitting at the coffee shop, and he's got it there, and he's explaining it to me. I really want to thank the family for including me. Really meant a lot to me. And I'm not sure what I'm going to do without David. I feel really fortunate that I had him. And I have to say that he's irreplaceable. There's nobody with that set of humanity and technical and humor. So many times he would introduce me as we were on polar opposites during the Vietnam War, because I was a peace activist. And yet, when I began to present to David why I am a peace activist, and he just completely became like what I called my peace wedge. He was the wedge in Ojai and introduced me to so many people and did so much to build a peaceful community here. The last 3 years, David was in the parade as we honored Ojai as an international city of peace. And coming up this Wednesday, he will still be with us as we march down Ojai Avenue to honor this place that we call City of Peace. So thank you all for how much you love David. And, yeah, he's very present with me. I don't know how many people call me David, just because we were very close in age, and we hung out so much together that, I would get introduced as David. And anyway, I'm happy to be Brian, and thank you for this great gathering here.
Hi, I'm David. I'm his grandson. And my grandfather was my biggest influence in my life. He meant more than anything to me. And I just figured I'd tell a little story because he'd never let me forget the story, even though I tried to. There's a time when we went to the lake for a holiday or something like that, and we had a cabin up there. And he wanted to play BS. And I was about like 12 years old, maybe, a little younger, never sworn in my life. And, they're like, no, it's okay. You could just say BS, it's fine. And I was like, okay, I was excited to play. I wanted to play the game with my grandpa. So we start playing, and I start really getting into it. And I start getting worked up, and about like a little bit through, something happens, and I yell bullshit as loud as I can. And ever since that day, no matter what, if he gets the chance, he would bring that up. And I tried to forget about it, but I never could. And he's not going to be able to bring it up anymore, but I'm sure I still won't forget, because there's no way I could forget him. So I'm really happy that everyone's here. I'm glad to see all his friends. I know he cared about everyone very much, and I hope I can carry his name as well as he did. Thank you, guys.
Hi, I'm Nita Kassar, wife of Ed, who's a long-term friend of his. I just have a funny little story to tell you. It's up too high, but there you go. Now you can hear me. Okay, good. So, when Dave was single, before Patricia, we hung out with Dave a lot up here. Whenever he'd tell us how wonderful it was, and he was having such a good time. And every time he came up, he had a different date. And they were all nice. We liked them, and but they were always changing. And so one night we came up, and we went to a party. I have no idea where it was or what it was for or anything else. But I just remember the one part of the party. We were standing in the back of the room, Dave and I and Ed, and Ed was talking to somebody. And I turned to Dave, and I said, "So, is this the one?" No. And he goes like this across the room. And I looked over, and I saw this nice-looking woman, well-dressed, kind of, trimly dressed, and so on. So I walked up to her. Oh, I followed her. That's what it was. I followed her out of the room, because she was going to have a smoke, and I was still smoking too. So I went outside and bummed a cigarette from her. And I talked to her, and we talked and yacked, like we were instant friends. I didn't say anything about Dave or anything, And she goes back in, I go back in, and I go up to Dave, and I go, He goes, yeah. Don't ever think he wasn't decisive. Thank you.
So, David is obviously the grandfather of, one of my great friends, and he offered to film my wife and my wedding. And he's a techie. Everyone already said that. He's very, very up and coming on the technology. So our other friend Austin just got the new drone. All right, sweet. Let's film this. David sat there and listened to him talk about the entire thing. At the end of it, he said, "That's cool. I got the new one." But he did. My wife and I still have the pictures. He did an amazing job on our wedding, and he did it out of the gracious of his heart as a gift for us. So he's an amazing man, and I'll never forget him. So.
Hello, my name is Sergio Aragones. I'm a cartoonist, and I was Dave's best friend, not that gentleman. That was what Dave felt with every friend. We felt like we were his best friends. He was so warm, and immediately you felt not only a friendship, and you were his best friend. Because, and I come from a culture that the coffee house is the center of friendship. You finish work and you go to the coffee house. You finish school and you go to the coffee house. Your friends are there. No matter at what time, there's some friends, and sometimes you don't go for 2 months and you arrive and they're still there. Different ones, but still there. So it's a culture. And when I arrived to Ojai, that's about 30-some years ago, that was the first thing I missed, was the coffee house. And when I met Dave, that was the perfect place because he loved the coffee house. So we have a group and we met there. No matter at what time, you could go there after dinner or before. It didn't matter. We ended together. And one thing I'm very proud is I made him laugh a lot. So that was very good. And he had a great sense of humor. He had great anecdotes. And he listened. That was the best part. I could talk and talk, and he listened. He never interrupted. I'm not a tech, so there was no competition because I don't even know how to use my telephone. So there was never competition there. But I was amazed. He even made me take a class right here about how to use the telephone. Well, after the second day, I didn't understand a word of what he was saying. But I kept coming because it was great listening to him and the rapport that he had with all his friends. They were no students, they were his friends. And I didn't learn anything, of course, because I'm totally negated for the new technologies. But we had a lot of things in common. And also, at the end of the talks, he always went to family. That was his prerogative, always, the family. And it was so extensive. And he will talk about everyone. And he remembered all the names, which was amazing. I don't have a grandson or anything, but he remembered it all. I cannot remember my cousins, but he remembered everyone. And I was in Europe during the war, at the same region that he was a mailman for the Navy. So all the Côte d'Azur, the south part, Fréjus, Cannes, Nice, all that area, that's where he delivered the mail for the Navy. So that was a point of talking also a lot. I went to school there, I was kind of young. But that was a great experience for him. He never talked about the war, but he talked about the good parts of the service. And he always made fun of me, too, my accent. He would laugh, I will say something, he'll crack up and says, "What's wrong with what I said?" Well, he will tell it to me and it still didn't make any sense because that was normal to me, you know. But to him, that was very funny, you know, and he will go over and over. What I said, it sounded logical until he explained it to me, and then I understood why he was laughing at. But it was a moment of my life which sadly won't be again, you know, knowing that if I could go to the coffee house, he was there. And I will miss him a lot. I will. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Norman Lang, and my grandfather's name was Baker, and my mother's maiden name was Baker. And many times, well, not many, but a few times I asked David, what do you think we ought to do about that? Do you think we ought to look into it? And he said, well, the first time he didn't really say a lot. The second time he said, well, maybe we ought to look into that and see what that's about. But maybe there was a connection to the Baker family. I don't know. However, David was a train riding buddy of mine. Him and myself and another, how he liked to call it, call us an old dude. We used to ride on the Amtrak train a couple of times down to Los Angeles to get something to eat. And David made a video. It was a still video, and it was called Three Old Dudes on a Train. And I got to tell you, that was a couple of years ago. And a couple of months ago, we went down, David, myself, another Ojai studio artist, Sandy Treadwell. He was a replacement. Sandy, David liked to call the person on the train that replaced somebody else the replacement dude. And I thought that was kind of funny all the time. He was a funny guy. But my wife went with us the last time we went down there. She's sitting over there, Tanya. And she went down as our historian. And we went down to see the Jasper Johns show down in Los Angeles. And before we went to the show, we got something to eat. And that's when David told the story to us of his out-of-body experience in that hospital. And I mean, I almost fell out of my chair. I thought, wow, I never heard a story like that before. I mean, this guy was a survivor. And he made it out to be kind of a funny story. He had that little laugh. I liked the way he laughed. He had a kind of a laugh, and it just it brightened up a lot of things going on. But I'm going to miss David for those rides, and when I did get to talk to him, I didn't talk to him very often, but he would call and he wanted us to go. He wanted me to go with him the last time down up to Santa Barbara and pick up Sandy Treadwell's car and watch a Star Trek movie, and we didn't get to do that. His passing was on a Monday, and we were supposed to do that on Wednesday. But we did go last December to a movie, a Star Trek movie down in Camarillo, and David invited me to that like 3 months before it even got on the screen. So I'm going to miss David. David, he was a thoughtful person, and like I said, I didn't know him real well, but I'm really glad of this gathering right here and this memorial. Anybody that really didn't know him, and he was, I could tell he really had a lot going on up here. He had a lot going on, and I was glad to have known him. And thank you for listening.
My name is Harvey Ron. I met David several years ago when I joined the Ojai Photo Club, and he was a member. And I've known him ever since, obviously. During the last several years, David's presence has become more and more important to the photo club, and for the last 2 or 3 years, he has essentially run it along with Brian and Myrna Cambianica. They're kind of the trio of people that make the club work. I want to mention 2 things about David I haven't heard other people mention here. One is his generosity as a photographer. I enjoy photography. I enjoy doing a little bit of artistic work with photography. David loved photography. As everybody has mentioned, he had a lot of technical skills. And he became more and more of an artist in photography. And you can see some of his artwork here. And he continued to progress and develop skills. And in my eyes, his art became better and better, and to the point where it's a very fine art the last few years. And the thing that, one of the things that impressed me about him is he would exhibit a photo that he had finished, and I would be so enamored by it, and I couldn't figure out quite how he had accomplished it. And so from time to time I would ask him, I say, how did you do that? And anybody who is familiar with photography and processing photography knows that photographers are sometimes very protective of their procedures and the skills they develop. And if you ask them, how did you do it, you may not get a very straight answer. David was the exact opposite. He was a 100% generous guy. So if I asked him, how did you do this, he didn't just give me a little bit of vague explanation. He would tell me exactly how he did it. He'd send me a link about where I could go online to find this filter online or whatever. So he was just a very helpful, totally generous person. That was one point. The other point I want to make was that he was very fond of his two dogs, Charlie and Pixel, and he would photograph them all the time. And I was very fond of my dog, whose name's Somas, and David was always very complimentary about my dog's photos, and I was complimentary about his dog's photos. So we shared this bond of loving dogs and loving to photograph our dogs and loving to exhibit our dogs' photos. So those are my primary memories of David, and I liked him a whole lot, and I'll miss him like everybody else will. So.
Hi, can I be heard? Hi. I met David because I needed to learn how to do Photoshop. I accepted a teaching job, teaching art and sculpture and Photoshop. I didn't know the first thing about Photoshop. So I went to the photo club meeting and I asked Brian to recommend somebody who could teach Photoshop. So that's how I first met David and Patricia. And so nobody's mentioned that he's really a patient teacher. He taught by example of what he knew real well, and I'd get to hear the best stories about his grands and his grand-grands. Is that grand? What a huge family. I had a party and I invited David and his wife, and that's where he met my husband. And Jack, the first one of the three old dudes that went to eat sausage in L.A. Anyway, I'll miss him. I know all of us will. There's no replacing him. But I just wanted to share. I just loved what a good teacher he was, and that what all of you have been talking about when you were talking with him, he really listened, and he was so funny. So, and he taught me a lot. Anyway, thank you.
Hi there. I'm Sharon Baker, probably one of the Bakers you don't know. I was married to David's older brother, Arthur. He passed away in October 24th, 1999. I wanted to just share a little insight. Now, I've known David since he was 24, which is probably a very different David than most of you know today. But I did want to share that the Navy picture. Dave went in the Navy, which many people may not be aware, because my husband joined the Navy. Now, my husband joined the Navy to get away from home. Dave joined the Navy because my husband joined the Navy. So about 6 weeks into the stint, they find out that my husband has a bleeding ulcer. So he's sent home. Now, David, he's in for the full jaunt. However, it was a good thing. That's where he met Mary, the mother of his children. And I'm not going to bore you with all the long stories that I probably know, which are very different. But he was a great person, and he was fun. He was a fabulous father, and I'm really glad I was able to come today. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Peggy, and I was probably, I don't know, maybe a tertiary friend of David's, but I didn't know it. Just what Sergio said, everybody felt like you were the only person in the world when David was talking to you. I was the beneficiary of his help in many ways. I had an old computer and I got some kind of virus, and David would spend hours and hours cleaning up my computer and then going above and beyond and looking for other things that he could do to make the memory more efficient. Or he knew I was struggling at the time, and he just couldn't have been more generous. He loved Patricia. He loved his dogs. He loved his family. He loved his grandchildren. He did know everybody's name. He honored them with the most beautiful photographs. And I don't think any of us are ever going to be without David, because I know my favorite photographs of myself in Ojai are photographs that David took. My favorite memories of the most wonderful celebrations and parties and even memorials in Ojai were David's photographs. David's everywhere. I loved him very much. Going to miss him, but I feel his presence here. I think he's always going to be here. Thank you.
My name is Moses Kravitz, and I want to follow up on something Peggy just said. David took the only photograph of me that I actually enjoyed looking at. And he also took a couple of passport photos that I will use when I travel around the world, so I will take him everywhere. I didn't know him as well as many of you did. Mostly we would hang out in my garage, which is my computer workshop, and we would talk tech. And he knew infinitely more than I did, although I was supposed to be helping him. And there's a couple of other things I want to say, but I can't remember. So thank you all for being here.
Hi, my name is Fatah Evans, and David is a recent friend of mine, 9 months or so, through Brian at the Coffee Connection. I sometimes live an isolated life. When I met David, and of course with Brian, I actually sat down for 10 minutes, and then the next time, 15 minutes, even a half an hour. I just like being in their presence. And David and I shared some things together when Brian wasn't there about Vietnam. And David helped me, encouraged me to how to deal with the VA when I was giving up. So that touched me. But then last month, he posted this picture of the Vietnam Memorial in Washington, D.C., of someone tracing a name. And I posted back onto his post, and I said, David, the wall is coming to Ventura, the moving wall. It's a replica. It's coming in June. And then he asked me, would you come with me? And we can trace names, and we could take pictures. You know, I felt so honored, so touched that he would ask me to join him. And of course, the next day, Memorial Day, David moved on. A couple nights later, I was thinking, well, what if I knew those names? What if in some way I could go and trace the names for David? So I was texting Brian. And then all of a sudden, I felt something, presence, and as if David was right here. And he conveyed, thank you. That's okay. You don't have to do it now. Because in a deep sense, that which he wanted to reconnect with and heal in himself, in his moving on, became healed. So, thank you.
I want to add one more thought. I see here everyone full of love for David and all the kind things and how we interacted with everyone. But until Dave moved up here to Ojai, Dave was an introvert. With not many friends. It was not his style. And after he moved up here, he blossomed. And when he'd come up when we'd meet every year or whatever, he started introducing me to new coffee houses, new friends, and all that. So for such a full life he had up here, all of you need to take credit for that. You realized who he was and opened your hearts to him.
Thank you guys, everybody who came up and said something. This is going to stay on. 3:30 is going to be the Navy's going to be coming to do a presentation. So we have that coming up. This will stay on. If anything comes up, everyone's welcome to come up and add something that maybe caught their thinking while everyone else was talking. But there's plenty of food and drinks over there, and everyone can hang tight and chit chat. And at 3:30 we'll continue. Thank you.
Today's ceremony will consist of the flag and taps and the unfolding, folding, and presentation of our national ensign. During the flag and taps, we ask that all past and present military members please render a final hand salute, and for all others, please place your right hand over your heart. At this time, if able, please stand.